Okay, I've known for a while I wanted to submit this story, but I've always felt odd about it since I'm still friends with some of this guy's family, and I would feel like a total douche if it was seen. However, I'd been home with the kids reading today, and getting a bit pissed that I had read all of your stories and was fresh out of creepy material. So, be a part of the solution, I guess. Here we go. I'm a member of the slam poetry scene. Basically, it's an excuse to get people to listen to performance poetry by adding a competitive element to things. After running through the small scene in my city and wanting to branch out and push my career further, I started visiting places within driving distance that I could spit. This led me to Charlotte, North Carolina. I started at their local team venue, where you compete to be a part of a squad that goes to a national competition every year. I was doing pretty well, and was accepted into the local crew pretty readily. This led to longer stays and features at some of the other venues in the city. I started going to one that was particularly popular and good for selling CDs. That's where I met him. He worked as a barback. Occasionally got on stage and shared, frankly, shitty poems. He was the brother of the host, and everyone knew and liked him. He slowly started flirting with me more and more. Although in my loose days, searching for acceptance and love everywhere, something always kept me a bit leery. I'd gladly accept the drinks he sent over, smoke his weed with the group in the stockroom between sets, and hang out at parties and events. I always had this tickle in my gut, warning me not to get too close, but over a year or two we continued to become friends. After a while, he started calling and texting more often, poking me on Facebook daily, sending messages about wanting to be more than friends, that he wanted to find a snow bunny. Yes, I'm white and he's black, and settle down. Again, I'd never entertained it. There was something gnawing at me. There was a crazy in his eyes that was too hard to miss. I eventually moved to Denver to take a position teaching poetry and work at a friend's law firm. The second Christmas I was there, I got the call. A friend from Charlotte relayed the following. He had eventually found this white girl and gotten married. They seemed to be happy at first, but slowly began fighting more and more. It spilled over into the venue, and often they had to be separated by friends from physically attacking one another in public. One friend, later thinking back, remembers the last time she saw them together. Him pushing his wife, followed by her throwing a drink in his face and scratching his neck, deep enough to draw blood. She said after the couple had been dragged away from each other, she sat with him and smoked a cigarette. She says she laughed and said, "You guys are gonna kill each other." Well, around Christmas last year, his wife just stopped coming to the bi-weekly events they both attended regularly. He explained it away by saying they were on a break. Time goes by. No one really questions that they hadn't seen or heard from her in quite a while. They thought she was taking a break from the whole scene in order to put some distance between herself and her husband. Her parents, however, hadn't heard from their daughter since Thanksgiving dinner. They would call him and he would say everything was fine and blow them off. This continued week after week, until a week after Christmas, knowing their daughter would never miss a holiday without at least a call. They called the police and sent them to the couple's home for a well-body check. The cops arrived and knocked on the door, and they were let in. They ask him where she is, and he replies that she's in the bedroom. He shows them to the room, and there she lay, dead for weeks, rotting into their bed. Oh, and he even killed her little dog, too. During this time, he had been attending events, hosting hip-hop nights, and even publishing a blog on making marriage work on one of the local organization's site. Never once letting on that every night he was going home and sleeping with the body of his murdered wife. The sickest part of it all is that he has a child from another relationship, a daughter whom he gets to celebrate every other holiday with. That Christmas, as they opened gifts, had dinner, cuddled up on the couch and watched movies, less than 100 feet away was the decaying body of her stepmother. I don't know what would have happened if I had ever taken him up on his offer to date, but I do know that me and my God are going to stay on speaking terms, and I will always listen. This is a weird story that I still can't quite figure out, but I got to think of it now since it's almost Christmas time. If anyone has an idea of what might be going on, or has any tips of what to do, please share it. I would be grateful for any help. A little more than 4 years ago, I moved in with my sister Aline, who is 2 years older than me. She got the apartment around mid-June of 2010, so when she got a Christmas card the following Christmas, addressed to someone named Ida, we didn't think too much of it. We thought it was probably for the person who had lived there before us. One thing about the card was odd, though. The only signature was a male name, and then the name of a town. That particular town is known for its mental institution for dangerous and insane criminals. There's only about 4,000 people living there, so the institution is what you immediately think of when you hear the name of the town. We brushed it off as a bit of a mistake, figuring the person who lived there before didn't give the new address to the one sending the card. We had almost forgotten about it. The same thing happened again the following Christmas. It was signed with the same sender and receiver as the year before. A little creeped out since we now remembered that the person living there before us was an old man who had passed away after living there for decades. We brushed it off again since nothing could really be done. Now this is where it gets even weirder. My sister got both our parents' surnames since they didn't marry until a month after she was born. She decided to use our mom's name, which is more uncommon, and I have decided to use our dad's name, which is one of the most common surnames in Sweden. This is important because the next Christmas, 2012, I had moved back home about 20 miles away in the middle of nowhere. A couple of days before Christmas, my sister came to live with us during the holiday. The very next day, there was a new card in our mailbox. It had my sister's address on it as usual, but it was now waiting for her in our dad's mailbox. That mailbox doesn't have her surname on it, since our mom passed away years before this. The card couldn't possibly have gotten there by mailman, since there's no connection between the two addresses. Still, though, it had prints on the stamp that proved it had been sent with the mail. The only explanation I can think of is that whoever sent the card must have picked it up at my sister's after noticing she wasn't home, and then somehow, probably through Facebook, figured out where she was. There's also a possibility that the cards are meant for me. This is starting to get kind of creepy, as I would really appreciate if anyone has any advice. If something is unclear, please feel free to ask. P.S. I'm almost 100% sure that it's not any of our friends doing this. This has been going on for many years, and none of them are the type that would joke in this way. This happened a few years ago, while I was still in high school. I was 17 at the time. I grew up in a small town, and my mother, sister, and I had moved to a larger city. I was home alone with my little sister, who was 3, as my mom regularly worked night shifts and I was a built-in babysitter. It was winter, just before Christmas, so by about 5 p.m. it was essentially pitch black outside. This happened at around 9. I would let my sister stay up late with me, and when she fell asleep cuddling with me on the couch, I would finally move her to her room. It would help me to eliminate the temper tantrums about bedtime. So we were laying on the couch when our dog started to lose her mind. Our dog was a big floppy basset hound named Matilda. She was incredibly sweet and would rarely ever bark, but at this point she was growling and the fur on her back was standing straight up. I immediately knew something was very wrong, and I picked up my sister and brought her to the washroom, which had no windows. I sat her in the tub and told her not to move. I locked the door from the inside and shut it. I go back to the living room, my sister safe and sound, and grab my cell phone, ready to call for help if I needed to. When someone starts banging on my door like crazy, I look through the peephole and I see a man standing outside, his face covered in blood. Matilda is losing her mind, and she's trying to force herself between me and the door. My heart is pounding in my ears, and it feels like my stomach is about to fall out of my ass. I have no idea what to do, so I move away from the door and stand there silently, freaking out. The banging gets louder, and then I start to hear voices and yelling, and the man pleading with me to please open the door. I go and look into the peephole again, and there's another man standing there, beating on the blood-covered guy. At this point, I'm just a small, defenseless 17-year-old girl, and there are 2 large men fighting outside, one of which is beating the crap out of another man covered in blood as he's begging me to let him into my house. Finally, I call 911. I give them the necessary information while I'm shaking uncontrollably, and they send the police, fire, and an ambulance. I genuinely don't think I made any sense during that phone call. I'm surprised they were able to narrow down what my address actually was. When the scene was finally taken care of, a police officer knocked on my door. We later found out that the bloody man was jumped a block or 2 away and was beaten very badly. He made a desperate run for it and finally made it to my house. The dude that was assaulting him caught up to him on our doorstep. At this point, my dog is still going ballistic. My toddler sister is locked in the bathroom crying hysterically, and I feel like I'm about to die from how much adrenaline is pumping through my body. I open the door for them, and the front of the door is just covered in blood from the hurt guy pounding on it. I started to break down. I was still shaking and shivering from everything, and I just started sobbing hysterically. I finally managed to get my dog to relax enough to let the officers come inside, and they helped me get my sister out of the bathroom. They called my mom at work to let her know what had happened. They took my statement about the whole ordeal and stayed with my sister and I until my mom finally got home from work. Needless to say that all of us slept that night in my mom's room together. In hindsight, I know the hurt man wasn't trying to scare or hurt either of us. He was just trying to get help, and I feel terrible that I didn't let him in, despite it being the right thing to do. I headed out to my local mall a few days ago, determined to do some serious Christmas shopping. As a bit of a reference, I'm only 5'5", and I'm quite thin. I have a shaggy pixie cut, and prefer the comfort of big t-shirts and skinny jeans most of the time. I get mistaken a lot for a 12-year-old boy more than I would like to admit. Sorry if this gets a bit long. So there I was, Christmas list in hand and ready to take this thing on like a champ. I had more money than I've had for Christmas in a long time, and I was really excited to get some excellent gifts for my best friend and my parents. I was walking along the ground floor, headed for the stairs, when I passed this lady who was giving out some hand lotions. She had a few small packets in her hand, and a larger bottle on a little table beside where she stood. Okay, cool, I think to myself. Grab a sweet-ass pocket lotion and keep going. I didn't want to be rude and just keep walking, so I took the lotion and smiled in a sort of "thanks for the lotion, lady" kind of way. Big mistake. Before I even had the opportunity to start moving again, this chick grabs my wrist and lets out a squeal that would hurt a banshee's ears. "You keep your nails natural?" Hell freaking yeah, I do. I clean for a living, so there's not much point in getting them done unless I'm going somewhere special. "Sure," I said, and tried to wrench myself free. To my dismay, this lady had a hold on me like a hungry anaconda, and I knew I'd be stuck listening to her sales pitch. I was a bit confused as to why she picked me out of the entire crowd of people walking, especially because the boots and studded jacket usually scared off potential creeps. Probably friends too, but hey. Unfortunately, all the leather and studs in the world did nothing for my baby face, so I probably still seemed like easy prey for this asshole. She's all, "Look how great this makes your hands and nails," while all I could think of was why she thought I cared. My hands are scarred and calloused from various do-it-yourself mishaps and years of guitar practice, so there isn't much that can be done for them at this point. I attempted a getaway by letting her know that I wasn't interested and that I had to get back to shopping before it got too late. She batted her eyelashes and said that, lucky me, since I was so cute, she would give me an entire set for the low price of $20 if I just followed her to go get it from her stand upstairs. I had just come from the top floor of the mall, since there were exits and entrances on both floors, and I knew for a fact that the only kiosk up there was an eyebrow threading shop. Like hell, I was going anywhere beside GameStop to get my little brother a new game for Christmas, so I declined. She tightened her hold and repeated the sales pitch, this time asking me weird questions in between trying to convince me to buy this mystery lotion. "How old are you?" 19. "Where do you go to school?" "I graduated." "Do you have a sister?" "No." "Where's your boyfriend?" "I don't have one." I tried again to tell her nicely, because I hate hurting people's feelings, to just fuck right off and let me get back to Christmas shopping. She stared me dead in my eyes and said, "Are you alone?" A million little alarms went off in my head, and I lied to her and told her I was there with my dad. She looked all around the mall and asked me, "Which one is he?" I pointed out the most intimidating-looking man I could find, and she launched right back into trying to sell me this product at warp speed, like she was in some kind of huge hurry. I told her again, more firmly this time, that I was not spending any money on her hand lotion. She started walking off in a random direction, still holding my wrist tight, and insisted that I come with her to see more of the products she was selling, because surely I would want something, despite the fact that every word out of my mouth said the complete opposite. Finally, I yanked my arm free and stood my ground, prepared to defend myself if she tried grabbing me again. "I'm not buying anything from you. I need to get back to shopping." Before I could even turn away, she asked me what I used to wash my face. A bit caught off guard, I told her, and she began launching a barrage of insults at me. "You're too pale, your skin is too dry, and my personal favorite, it looks like a shedding lizard." Ouch, that hurt. I didn't put any stock into her petty attempts to insult me. People had complimented me on my skin before, and I was fine with the way I looked either way. I walked away instead of throwing anything back at her, and headed upstairs to finish shopping. Before I left the mall that night, I marched my dry lizard skin right over to the nearest mall cop and informed him that he had some rude-ass people working in the mall. I wasn't sure who else to tell, so I wasn't surprised to see him scrunch up his face in confusion. I expected him to direct me to a sort of complaints desk or something similar, but nothing could have prepared me for what he said next. "Miss, we don't sell that here." Well, shit. I described the woman and told him what brand of lotion she had tried to get me to purchase, but he only shook his head and told me that the vendor for that particular brand had not been coming around that mall for years. On my way back to the parking lot, I passed the spot where she had originally confronted me. There was no woman, no lotion samples, no vendor's cart. I later asked my cousin, who worked in the mall, if there was anyone selling that lotion there. She said no, and a quick peek at the mall's online directory confirmed it. I hate to think of what would have happened if I had ended up following her. So, this happened at Christmas a couple of years ago, when I was spending the holidays with my parents and little brother, along with my cousins, aunts, and uncles. We live in a suburb of Ontario, but we were venturing out into the woods for Christmas, an idea that my parents had had for a long while. They always loved the idea of being out in a hunting cabin during Christmas with their families. I'm a 22-year-old female, but at the time I was newly 18, and my little brother Tom was only 11. We're really close, and we do everything together. We also had a dog, a German Shepherd called Trigger, who came along for the ride too. He's a real softie, but he can be really overprotective, especially of my brother Tom. Anyway, we left from our house on Christmas Eve at about 2 p.m. and climbed into our dad's truck, filled with all of our stuff and presents for his extended family. Tom and I were both really excited, winding each other up, and my parents were having a friendly conversation as we moved along the road. We arrived at the village near the cabins we were staying in, and caught up with my dad's sister, Billy, along with her husband and their 3 kids. They didn't converse for long, but Billy was a bit unsure where to go from the village to get to the cabins, so my dad helped her out by writing down the directions. We soon got back on our way, and arrived back at the cabins at around 4 p.m. It was a cluster of them sort of spaced out around the woods. Each family had a cabin to themselves, and there was one where everyone could meet up with a pool table, a swimming pool, and all sorts of recreational activities. It was a kind of place where we could all just chill together and enjoy each other's company. Anyway, the weather was already extremely cold when we arrived, and the snow was falling all around us, so as me and my brother unpacked our things into the cabin and settled in for the night, my dad started a fire, whilst my mom made our dinner. It was great. The Christmas decorations were already up, and we played a few board games as the night got darker. Dad, Tom, and I decided before coming on the trip that we'd all go hunting sometime, so we planned to go the next day. I'd been a few times with my dad, but this was Tom's first time. He was only there to watch us, though, as he was too young to shoot. It reached about 10 p.m., and my brother and I were starting to get a bit tired, so we decided to head to bed. My dad kept his rifles in a bag which he kept under the bed I was sleeping on. He'd usually keep it in a locked box, but thought there was no point since we were just going to be hunting the next morning anyway. Tom and I were sharing a room at the end of the cabin, facing a flowing river. The view was beautiful. Tom and I fell asleep with our dog, Trigger, lying at the bottom of Tom's bed. Now this is when things begin to get creepy. It was about 3 a.m. when I awoke to the sound of Trigger growling. I didn't find this particularly unusual, because my dad suffers from insomnia, so sometimes when he can't sleep, he sits in our sitting room at home and watches TV. Like I said, Trigger is extremely overprotective and growls at any noise he hears. But that's when I noticed that there was no light coming from under my door. My dad never sits in the dark. I whispered to Trigger, telling him to be quiet as Tom slept, but his growling soon turned into barking, which woke Tom right up. He asked me what was going on, but I said Trigger must have heard some deer or something outside. After all, we were in the middle of the woods. Suddenly, our bedroom door swung wide open, and the light switch was turned on. My eyes stung as I tried to focus on whoever it was at the door. It was my dad. "Were the two of you laughing just now?" he asked as I turned to look at Tom. His eyes were wide and his face was pale. "No," I replied as he moved over towards our curtain, pulling it back as he looked out into the pitch-black wilderness. "What are you looking at?" Tom asked our dad as he closed the curtains again. "It's nothing. Just go back to sleep." I was kind of creeped out that my dad didn't say anything about what he was doing, but he turned our light off and we tried to fall back asleep again. Of course, I couldn't. I was wide awake for the rest of the night, flinching at pretty much every noise. It was about 4:30 a.m. when I finally drifted off, but it must have just been moments later when I heard strange crunching noises coming from outside our window. I was sure this wasn't some sort of animal. It sounded like footsteps. I had this overwhelming feeling of fear, and I pulled the covers right over my face, sweat beginning to cover my forehead. Then, I heard a faint tapping on our window, which lasted for a good many minutes. I was so petrified I couldn't even move. Trigger was wide awake at this point, and I saw his face turn towards the window, his ears pointed and listening intently. The tapping started again, but louder this time, causing Trigger to bare his teeth. What happened next was the most terrifying thing that has ever happened to me. "I know you're in there, little guy," a deep and husky voice whispered as a horrible shiver went down my spine. "Why don't you come out here and play with me?" Initially, I was filled with rage. I thought it was bound to be one of my cousins playing a stupid prank on us, so I leaned forward and peeked through the gap in the curtain, ready to give them hell for scaring the shit out of us. But standing there wasn't any of our cousins. It was some old man who was around 60, his hair matted, and his clothes looked dirty and ancient. He was stroking at the window with his hands, breathing heavily on it as he spoke. I went into protective mode. I didn't know what else to do, so I grabbed my dad's hunting rifle from under the bed and pulled the curtain all the way back. "Get the fuck out of here or I'll shoot." I felt adrenaline rush through me as the creepy man's eyes widened. The most terrifying smile appeared across his face. Trigger began barking louder than I've ever heard him bark. My parents obviously heard the commotion and came running through our room, turning the light on. My mom screamed as she saw the old man through the window, Trigger continuing to fiercely bark at him. My dad yelled at the man, telling him that the police were on their way, but the man legged it back into the woods. Tom was petrified, but I was angry more than anything else. How could some sicko do this? I was extremely glad I had the rifle. The cops caught the man just a few minutes later and arrested him. I found out a couple of days later that the creepy man was some homeless guy living in the woods, and he was suffering from quite a lot of mental issues. It scares me to death to think about what could have happened to my brother if I hadn't been there. We spent the remainder of Christmas at the cabin, but we stayed in our Aunt Billy's cabin overnight. There was no way we were sleeping in our own after that happened. We went home first thing on Boxing Day and never looked back. My dad only told me the other day that he knew someone was hanging around our cabin, so he intentionally left the rifle under my bed in case I had to use it in the night as self-defense. He did that because he didn't want either of us to get scared. He called the cops immediately after he heard the man laughing outside his bedroom window, singing nursery rhymes. He knew it would take a while for the cops to reach the cabin. Safe to say, that was the scariest experience of my life. So, like many people on here, I've been lurking on here for quite a while now. After reading many interesting and horrifying stories, I decided to share one of my own. Names in this particular story had been changed. It was December, and Christmas was right around the corner. It was late, at around 3 a.m. or so. I was sick at the time, so I was on a strange sleep schedule. I was a bit bored and none of my friends were online, so I decided to venture into a little site called Omegle. I went on there quite often at the time, mainly to troll people, but tonight I decided to have some actual conversations with the people on there. Big mistake. I decided to talk to some people under the anime tag, because people on there seem generally cool for the most part. Of course, there's always horny teenagers looking for a girlfriend, no matter what tag you're on. I eventually find someone who isn't a bot, and who doesn't immediately ask ASL, meaning age, sex, and location. We'll call her Azula. Azula asked me what my favorite anime is, and I jokingly said Fat Albert. I knew I said I didn't want to troll, but I just couldn't help myself. A conversation ensued after that about anime and such, and she seemed like a genuinely decent person. She then asked me for my email. I gave her my spam account, knowing that there was no real harm in giving that one out. So we continue our chat in Google Plus Hangout. She starts to ask to video chat. I decline, telling her that I don't even voice chat with my real-life friends, but she keeps on persisting, and I keep telling her no. I was starting to think that she was actually some pedophile. I told her that I didn't feel comfortable revealing my face to anyone online, and I didn't really want to voice chat. She then said she'll send me a picture of her face if I send her a picture of mine, so I let her send hers first. I did a reverse image search on multiple sites to see if the photo was fake, but nothing came up anywhere, so I knew that it wasn't. Reluctantly, I took a picture of myself and sent it to her. I figured it couldn't do any harm. She kept on persisting to video chat, and I kept telling her no. Then I turned my computer off because I was tired and a bit annoyed. I didn't really think much about it, but I was planning on blocking her the next day. A day later, I got on my computer and was just about to block her. As soon as I got on, she messaged me immediately. At this point, I thought she was either stalking me or just had no life and was at her computer all day. I went ahead and talked to her. She apologized for being pushy and explained that she didn't have many friends and just wanted to get to know me. I said it was fine. We talked about anime as well as video games and such. A pretty normal conversation for me. The next day, we talk again. She wanted to video chat, but I told her that I'd settle for a voice chat, since I did that all the time. Once we were in the voice call, she kept asking me to turn my camera on. Her camera was already on, so at this point I was sure she wasn't just some 40-year-old man. I told her I didn't feel comfortable doing that. She said that she wanted me to do a video chat to make sure I wasn't some 40-year-old pedophile. My voice was quite deep at the time, so I understood why. Again, reluctantly, I turned my camera on. After that, everything seemed to be okay. I could tell that there was something wrong, but I figured she was just socially awkward. After that, things were okay for a few weeks. But one day, she randomly told me that she had a crush on me. I told her that I don't do online relationships, and she got very depressed after that. She kept saying how every guy, 5 total I believe, has turned her down, and she got really sad about it. I didn't really know what to do at this point. I felt really bad for her because I knew how it felt to be rejected, and how awkward it is to stay friends with them afterwards. I made one of the dumbest mistakes of my life. I said that I actually did like her back. Nowadays, there's no way in hell I would have done any of this, but I was only 14 at the time and I was young and dumb, so just keep that in mind. I was basically in a fake, fabricated online relationship at this point. I didn't consider her my girlfriend, and only one of my friends, who we'll call Eric, ever knew about her existence. In fact, one day he was in a group chat with us. That's when things started to get a bit strange. In the group chat, we all had a decent conversation, but it got weird after I left. Azula started asking Eric lots of personal questions about me. Eric tried to give her the runaround, telling her that she should be asking me about this stuff. She was asking questions like what my last name was, where I lived. Eric didn't tell me about this, but I saw it in the group chat. I thought it was really strange that she would ask him these questions, knowing that I would see them when I got back. Anyway, the crucial point is she kept asking me what my last name was. Remember, Azula was very persistent, and she wouldn't stop asking a question even if you declined. So I find out that she goes on Facebook and searches every person with the same first name as I have. My name is fairly common, so there's a lot of people there with my first name. I couldn't believe it. She spent days trying to find my Facebook. I've never seen so much dedication. Red flags were definitely going off at this point. She eventually managed to find my Facebook and sent me a friend request. I declined it because I was very pissed that she was invading my privacy. She then started messaging me on Google Hangouts, asking about all my family members. My friends on Facebook weren't private for some reason. She literally wrote down a list of all of them, asking how each and every one of them were related to me. I started to get really scared at this point. I knew that I had a stalker on my hand, and I didn't know what to do. I blocked her on everything, and deleted everything on the net that had my real name on it. I officially went rogue. She eventually emailed me on another email of mine. Don't ask me how she found it. I have no idea. Perhaps it was on my Facebook before I deleted it. Anyway, she spams that email with countless messages every day. I blocked her and the email stopped. I didn't hear from her for about a month. Then one day, I accidentally deleted an important email. I went to the trash to recover it. In my trash bin, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of emails from her. I nearly soiled myself in fear. The last email was from that very same day, so in morbid curiosity, I decided to read some of them. What I found was nothing short of frightening. She told me that she thought there was something wrong with her, that she enjoyed and got off on the pain of others. She said that she knew where I lived and was going to fly over there and live with me. I was so scared at this point. I was worried that she was going to come and kill me. I deleted that email account, and I've tried to stay off the grid ever since. English is my third language, so keep that in mind when snickering at my less than perfect grammar. When I was 20, it was really hard to find work in my hometown. I eventually managed to get a job, though, as an administrator. I don't know what this sort of place is called in English, but I'll describe it a bit for you. People who commit very serious crimes, usually arson, murder, or the like, who are believed to suffer from mental issues or personality disorders, are placed there instead of a normal prison. You know what kind of place I'm speaking of. Yeah, that's where I worked. I'm a rather petite woman, just over 50 kilograms and looking many years younger than my actual age. An easy target, you might say. I rarely interacted with the interns, apart from being the one to let them in and out of the gate when they had a reason to be outside the facility, and then always escorted by the guards. There was one man, a short and broad dude from the Philippines, who always looked at me with the creepiest smile you ever saw. eyeing my ID badge closely every time. I, of course, had no right to know what those people had done to end up in this place, but my boss felt the need to tell me about this man. "Watch out for him," she said. "He's a serial stalker and arsonist. Never let your guard down. People think he's stupid, but he's not. He's actually very intelligent." The summer turned into fall, and in September that year I left that job to go back to university. It wasn't until 2 years later in December, just before Christmas, that it happened. I was shopping for a bracelet for my sister, when suddenly I heard a whisper right next to my ear. "Hello, Josephine." I turned around and find myself eye to eye with the stalker and arsonist man. He even remembered my name. I didn't buy the bracelet. I left in a hurry, certain that he had only been out on one of his short visits outside, and the guards were close by watching. They did that to let the interns train for being let out again, and give them freedom under a watchful eye 1 hour per week or so, just to see how they handle it. I didn't see any guards that I recognized, but I was sure they were there. I went home. My sister and I have a flat each on the top floor of an apartment building, and when we're home we both keep our doors open, and kids and pets can roam freely between our homes. We were in my flat, decorating the Christmas tree, when I heard the steps. Not the light steps of my niece, not the fast steps of my fiancé. It was the heavy, slow, determined steps of the arsonist. He had found me, and he was on his way up. I threw myself at the door, locking it shut. My sister had no idea what was going on, but I told her to take the kids, go into the bathroom, and lock the door. Then I told her to call the cops. I stood by the locked front door, just listening to the steps. I could hear him roaming around in my sister's apartment. He had found her Christmas cards and was reading the names of her children out loud. Then he started searching for something while whistling happily. My sister, always a rock, was keeping the kids calm in the bathroom while I was listening to him merrily explaining that he needed tools so they could break open the lock to my apartment. Since I knew who he was, and the police knew who he was, they arrived very quickly, and soon the situation was resolved. It turned out that since there were too few places to keep those people, some had been let out early to make room for those considered more dangerous. I guess he found me by chance that day in the store, and decided there and then to go after me. It was a frightening experience, and if my boss hadn't warned me so vigorously about this man, I don't think I would have acted as fast as I did. Throwaway here, as my other account has some personal information. Anyways, a few weeks ago, I was moving some stuff around in my room and accidentally broke the glass on my window. It was a small crack and didn't fully break, but it was enough that cold air and condensation were getting in and making my window ice up. I threw a space heater in my room to try warming the place up. Now, we have an old house, and if we have 2 heaters on at the same time, the fuses will blow and shut off the power to the back side of the house. The other night it got particularly cold, so I plugged in the heater to the outlet closest to my bed. This outlet was controlled by the light switch, so when I turn on the switch, the heater also goes on. It's one of those ones with dials, not power buttons. When it got time for bed, my room was sufficiently warm, so I turned off my heater. I told my parents that my room was warm enough now, so they put their heater on for the night. Fast forward to about 2 a.m., when I hear some noise in my brother's room. I think nothing of it and just shake it off. I just laid there, and the noise had stopped, so I laid back down and tried to fall asleep. Then I started hearing noises in the kitchen. This was odd, as nobody would be rummaging through the kitchen drawers at this time of night. I started to get a little worried and checked my phone. I see a Snapchat from my brother from about 1 a.m., and he was out getting wasted with his friends. I calmed down and think that he just got an Uber home. I was wide awake at this point, so I checked my texts and email and got back on Snapchat. This was when I really started freaking out. On the stories, there was my brother, posted 13 minutes ago at a buddy's house who lived more than 20 miles away. It wasn't my brother in the house. Reading too many Let's Not Meet stories, I had put an old broken hockey stick in my room in case of emergencies. Not the best weapon, but it's what I got. I quietly crept out of bed to turn the lights on to find it. I had forgotten my heater was already plugged in, so as soon as I flipped the switch, the lights went out, but so did the rest of the power. It also just so happens that on that end of the house is where our CO detector is, and when the power cuts out, it beeps, loud. Whatever the case was, this startled whoever was in my house, and the kitchen door flew open. I woke my parents up and let them know what happened. Once we got power on, we noticed my brother's bedroom window was wide open. We saw footprints beneath my window, but thankfully the ice had frozen the window shut from the outside. Whoever was in my house climbed into my brother's room and was rummaging throughout our home. The bags left over under the Christmas tree had been torn through, and all the kitchen drawers were open. We contacted the police, who took down the information and said this kind of behavior is normal around the holidays. People will find empty houses and look for gifts or cash, things of that sort. I don't know what would have happened if I had come face to face with this guy and my hockey stick, but for now, would-be burglar, let's not meet. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. As always, be sure to let me know what you guys think, and please feel free to like, comment, or subscribe if you feel so inclined. I know some people have also had some problems about videos not appearing in their sub box, so please make sure to hit that little bell if you guys want to always be notified of when my next video comes out. As always, links to all of my social media will be in the description of the video below. You can find links to my Twitter, Gmail, Twitch, and Facebook accounts. So if you guys ever want to talk to me, just go ahead and shoot me a message on any of those, and I'll try to respond to your message as soon as possible. I'm also going to start trying to stream on Twitch a little bit more, so if you guys have notifications on there, you'll be notified right away when I go live. I might also try to do some on YouTube, but I haven't decided yet. I'm still kind of trying to decide what kind of streams I want to do. Anyways, if you guys have a story you would like to send in, or if you have a story you would like to suggest that I read, go ahead and send me a message on any of those links in the description below. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include the title, how you would like to be credited, and any genres that the story might have, if it does have one. If you guys are curious about the music used in this video, go ahead and take a look in the description below as well. I always put all of the music in the order in which it appears in the video, and I also have links to the artists as well. Last but not least, I also have a Patreon if you guys feel like you want to contribute to the channel a little bit. But of course, as always, it is never required, and you will never have to pay for watching any of my videos. So that's just something you do if you feel like it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and please be sure to leave your feedback in the comments below. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you very much.